We are in glorious Etherville, about to enjoy the 4th hour Upstream and Don't Waste Durham. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Peter Houstel. I am the Executive Director for the Maryland Recycling Network, and we will soon be joined by Macy Zander and Crystal Dreisbach, who will tell you all the stuff you really want to hear about. Before we get to that, I just want to remind everybody that we have coming up our annual conference on Monday, June 12th at the Turf Valley Conference Center. Great program, great exhibitors, and a lot of great people to see and share some time with. And also this year, for the first time on Tuesday, we're going to have 3 different activities in which you could participate. We'll have a golf tournament in the morning on one of the newly renovated championship golf courses at Turf Valley, as well as a tour of the Linganore winery in the morning, and then in the afternoon, a tour of Howard County's compost facility at Alpha Ridge. So please keep an eye on your email. You get a chance to sign up if you've registered for the conference for one of those activities as well. Then, as we go through our presentations this morning, if you would have a question, please post that question into the chat box on your computer, and we'll be sure that Macy and Crystal get a chance to answer that. We are recording this webinar, so it will be shared virtually after the fact, and you'll get a chance to pass that on to anybody else you want to, or check it out again if you haven't want to recall what you just saw today. So moving forward, I want to remind everybody we have a lot of people who help us keep going. As anyone knows, when you run a business, you need money to make things work. And we have some wonderful patrons and sustaining members whose dues help pay the bills. And of course, if you're not a member, I do welcome and encourage you to please join. Even the smallest amounts are helpful. We have memberships ranging from $25 up to as much as you want to spend. So please, if you're not a member, join today. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Macy Zander. Macy, tell us about Upstream and let's rock and roll.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Macy Zander, and I'm the Reuse Communities Policy and Engagement Officer here at Upstream. I am based in Austin, Texas, and I'm very happy to be here with y'all today. For those of you that might not be familiar with Upstream, we are a national NGO that's been operating since 2003. We have a focus on upstream solutions to plastic pollution. And for us, that means transitioning away from the throwaway economy to a new way of thinking about how goods are delivered to customers. We work to replace the disposability model with reuse and refill systems that are safe, durable products that help to solve plastic pollution, toxic chemical exposure, climate change, and provide a just transition away from the extractive and polluting processes that harm fence-line communities. So what exactly do we mean when we refer to the throwaway economy? Well, the throwaway economy is a system in which 15% of wood harvested, 22% of aluminum mined, 40% of plastic created, and 50% of glass produced goes primarily to making single-use packaging that is consumed often in a matter of minutes before it gets trashed, recycled, or littered. It justifies the necessary extraction of precious natural resources on the front end while creating significant amounts of waste and pollution impacts on the back end. This system treats the resources of our planet as disposable. And I'm sure you all know this, but all too often, the impacts of disposability disproportionately burden people of color and low-income communities who live on the fence lines of the extraction, manufacturing, and disposal industries. Extracting hydrocarbons, metals, and trees from the earth, and then turning them into a throwaway package pollutes our air, water, and habitat with accompanying impacts as well on community fabric and long-term human health implications. This pollution is the alarming evidence that fence-line communities are also being treated as disposable. So as you know, the most viable and ubiquitous form of pollution from the throwaway economy is litter and debris. The international coastal cleanup data consistently shows that most litter and macro debris consist of food and beverage packaging that escapes the waste management system and is released into the environment more than any other product type. Fortunately, there is an alternative, and that alternative is reuse. So while LCAs or life cycle assessments can be a flawed metric, the data we do have shows lower greenhouse gas emissions and climate impacts from reusables in almost every single scenario. On the slide here, we have an example showing the dramatically lower impacts from reusable cups versus their disposable counterparts. We have similar findings for clamshells, plates, and also cutlery. Even Clorox has gone on the record to say that reuse is essential to reaching their climate goals. And just in case you're thinking, reusables actually need more water, we've actually found quite the contrary. Reusables generally have a lower water footprint over their life cycle, particularly glass and ceramic. For the life cycle of reusables, most of the water impact is in the use phase, particularly during the dishwashing, whereas the water impacts of disposables are related to the extraction of the resources, the production, and the manufacturing. So one-to-one, a reusable cup would have a way bigger water footprint than a disposable one. But reusables, as the name implies, are meant to be used many, many times. So over their lifetime, a reusable has a much lower water footprint. We did the calculations and found that 500 paper cups consume 370 gallons of water, whereas a single ceramic cup that's used 500 times uses 53 gallons of water. So over the lifetime, ceramic cups, which generally last for more than 1,000 uses, have a far lower water footprint. Now, if all the restaurants across the US switched to reusables for dine-in, and if to-go and takeout were to move to reusables in all US metro areas, which is where 82% of the population lives, these statistics here are some of the results that we would see. So I'm not gonna, for the sake of time, I'm not gonna read them off. I know that you all are gonna have access to this set of slides later, but ultimately it is a win-win, whether you look at the environmental benefits or the economic. So bottom line, reuse wins. If plastic production and use continue to grow as planned, emissions could reach 1.34 gigatons per year by 2030. This is the equivalent to the emissions from more than 295 500 megawatt coal-fired power plants. One of the biggest benefits of reusables is that they reduce the demand for plastic production. Reuse services also have the opportunity to create good, green, local jobs in logistics. So our overall mission here at Upstream is being propelled by our new 30 by 30 goal. The goal is to have 30% consumable goods sold in reusable formats in the US and Canada by the year 2030, specifically focusing on opportunities to transform the food service, beverage, and consumer packaged goods sectors. We see the new reuse economy as a wholesale shifting of supply chains for consumable goods and services from the current single-use paradigm to new reuse service models. At Upstream, we see our role in the larger reuse movement as being that of conveners, facilitators, and bridge builders that are focusing on growing and supporting a community of reuse solutioneers across businesses, nonprofits, communities, and government sectors. We also view our role in this space as content creators and knowledge curators that are developing and producing content that adds value, showcases the reuse economy we're working to create, while facilitating shared learning, understanding, and action across sectors. And then lastly, solution ideators and catalysts that are creating partnerships to develop new projects, initiatives, and tools to scale the new reuse economy. So I think I've made the case here that the problem we see is single use. And the way to get to the new reuse economy is by reimagining packaging as a service rather than a product unto itself. So viewed as a leader within the reuse space, Upstream has definitely been uniquely positioned to watch and participate in the ever-changing reuse landscape here within the US. Our 30 by 30 vision was developed to capitalize on these major shifts within the movement as we want to continue scaling reuse infrastructure and help change overall behaviors towards source reduction concepts. So since 2018, we have seen a lot of change with some very serious shifts. First, with brands. So brand opposition to extended producer responsibility, or EPR, and deposit return systems was very prevalent and pervasive in 2018. There was generally skepticism to reuse and refill. Whereas fast forward to now, many brands are signaling support for these policies, and many of them are even piloting reuse. We have gone from also being one of the very few NGOs out there talking about reuse. It's still a fairly niche topic, but it was super niche about 5 years ago. Whereas now we're seeing some of the biggest NGOs like Oceana and WWF now very engaged in this topic and developing reuse initiatives. City policy on this topic has exploded in recent years, and we're now also seeing policy opportunities to support reuse at the state and increasingly also at the federal level. And then, of course, dozens of reuse service companies are now operating in North America. And then lastly, equity and justice have become much bigger priorities for organizations and corporations, especially since 2020. So these new social and political shifts have created a pretty ideal condition for the expansion and increased overall reach of reuse refill concepts throughout the United States. So I'm going to dive into this new landscape a little bit now with a bigger focus on policy in particular, and you can get an idea of some of the shifts taking place. So as mentioned, we're seeing a large shift overall in support for EPR. This shift has come from major global businesses as they begin to understand the need to shift to reusable packaging. We're also seeing similar support from big brands regarding DRS, with some quotes pictured here on this slide. Upstream is actively involved at the negotiation table on both of these policy levers, and we personally have seen these big brands engaging on legislation at the state and the federal level. We're currently seeing movement regarding existing and new bottle bills, with the most recent push coming out of the Northeast and states for the new, bigger, better bottle bill. These bills will increase deposits and expand the container types that are covered. And at the moment, we are seeing pending legislation in New York, Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, whereas Connecticut and California have passed updates to their bottle bills in the recent last couple of years. So the push to develop comprehensive EPR DRS bills with reuse targets will be key to further expanding the reuse movement. And perhaps most exciting on this bottle bill DRS landscape is what's happening at the federal level. So we are deeply engaged with federal lawmakers, brands, and other NGOs on a federal bottle bill, which we expect to be introduced later this year. In regards to extended producer responsibility, EPR, we view it as a strong policy tool that has the potential to incorporate necessary funding for reuse infrastructure and incentives for brands to sell products in reusable packaging. So for example, California's EPR bill, or EPR law, includes specific targets for reuse and mandates source reduction by 25% for single-use plastics by the year 2032. Producers must meet this source reduction target in part by switching to reusable packaging. Bringing the conversation a little bit closer to home, there were both EPR and DRS bills in Maryland this year. So the EPR bill, SB 222, has been years in the making with heavy involvement from industry and other stakeholders. This basically started out as packaging EPR with some reuse provisions. However, there were no targets, which is ultimately what we would like to see. But since its original formulation, it has become more or less of a study bill. It's going to establish a packaging PRO in the state, as well as an advisory council, and will mandate a statewide needs assessment focused mostly on recycling and composting infrastructure, though there is one line that requires the needs assessment to evaluate reuse infrastructure as well. So assuming the governor signs this bill, this is going to be a really good one to keep an eye on as we track the implementation needs assessment and subsequent policy recommendations that get made to the legislature on how to implement packaging EPR in the state. Namely, we need to make sure that it gets reuse included in a meaningful way. The other bill is the DRS bill, HB 1089, which includes investments into reuse refill systems, incentives for the development of reusable refillable containers, and minimum 10% of beverage containers returned and refilled by the end of 2032. So Upstream overall is tracking EPR and DRS legislation, and earlier this year, we released a new set of policy principles showcasing how reuse can and should be integrated into these bills. So we are excited to see more and more integration of reuse and into EPR and DRS in the coming years. Upstream, along with our NGO allies in this space, have also supported approximately 70 reuse-specific laws in the US, covering nearly 1/3 of the population since 2018. This was accomplished by focusing on two main policy approaches, which is reduce and reuse as much as possible. So some of the main opportunities that have been successful for all levels of government, especially at the local level, have been only allowing reusables for on-site dining, foodware accessories upon request, which sometimes colloquially gets called skip the stuff. New York City passed that recently. I think that's the most recent big victory we saw. And then reuse at government events, workplaces, and in procurement. We're also seeing a lot of non-policy approaches that local government can take, including the development of municipal reusable takeout containers, such as what the city of Truckee in California is doing right now. Local and state grant funding opportunities for businesses to switch away from disposables. And then lastly, public-private partnerships, such as what's happening right now between the city of Seattle and a number of NGOs, consultancies, and reuse businesses. And the collective that is promoting reuse in Seattle right now is called Reuse Seattle. I highly encourage y'all to check them out if you're not familiar with their work. I would say that they are kind of the avant-garde of reuse from a city lens. And then in regards to the federal level, there is a ton happening right now. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to dive in, but we're very happy to be a resource if you want to discuss anything about federal support for reuse. From like the lens of the company landscape, just to give an idea of how much growth we have seen in this sector, in 2019, there was roughly just a dozen reuse refill startups operating within the US. Today, there's more than 150. That is a 1,150% increase in the last 4 years. So we are very excited to see that, and some examples of some companies are pictured here. So at Upstream, we love to end our presentations with a bit of inspiration for the movement. The future of the reuse movement is bright here in the US, and the ever-changing landscape of reuse is really beginning to take shape. We know that there's still a lot of hard work that needs to be done from across all sectors to ensure that reuse becomes the new status quo moving forward. However, before we end, let me bring you quickly to a future where society has fully embraced reuse refill concepts. So imagine in the future, all the restaurants in your city only allow for you to eat on real plates with real cutlery and real cups. To-go coffee is always provided in returnable, reusable cups. Takeout and delivery comes in reusable to-go containers. At the ballpark and at all concert venues, everyone is drinking beer out of real cups. Same thing for your favorite drinks that you purchase. When you bring them home, they're in refillable bottles. Or you can make your products at home. You can get groceries, cleaning, and personal care products delivered in reusable containers. Or you can go and you can pick them up at the store. And delivery drivers will pick up your reusable packaging, and they will also drop them off. Or, which Crystal will speak to more, I'm sure, you can put the reusables in with your recycling. Or you can return them at the store. or you can return them when you're out and about on town. And none of these innovations require you to bring your own anything. So this is just a quick parting vision of what the future could be like if we really do foster a culture of reuse. So the best way to get involved is to join our network of hundreds of governments, NGOs, community leaders, and reuse entrepreneurs. So we have two networks, the Government Reuse Forum and the North American Reuse Network. If you are a government person, you are able to join both. If you are not working in government, please only sign up for the North American Reuse Network. But we would love to welcome anyone from this call into either of those spaces. So with that, I will hand it over to Crystal.
Great stuff, Macy. Thanks very much. Big round of applause for Macy. And Crystal's going to hop on the screen here and share her story with us. Really looking forward to this. Crystal?
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me back in this great space. And I think Macy set it up super well. I want to drill down now and talk to you about my experience at the city level. And I want to mention that you probably saw the title for this session and wondered, wait a minute, reuse is already one of the 3 R's. What's the 4th R? So sometimes I think I like to describe what I'm about to tell you about as recirculation. Some people say, oh, I love reuse already. I wash out my Ziploc bags and use them again. And that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I really love to talk about the true circular economy of use and return. So with that, let me tell you a little bit about what I hope to talk about. In this presentation, I want to give you just a brief introduction to my organization, which is a nonprofit called Don't Waste Durham. We're based in Durham, North Carolina. Give you some practical examples of our recirculation businesses and initiatives that we operate, and then tell you about some opportunities I see for the recycling industry. So just as a backstory, I was working in public health research in 2010, and I got some takeout food in a styrofoam box, and that's what really launched me into my career, now long career in the circular economy and reuse and preventing waste before it exists. I then founded Don't Waste Durham, and our mission is to create solutions that prevent trash. We have created and operated a lot of circular economy innovations that I want to briefly tell you about. We have a behavior change model, and a lot of people talk about educating consumers, and I think that is absolutely very important, and we do that. But I think that the planet doesn't necessarily have time for all of the consumer attitudes to catch up with the needs. So I think that equally important is policy change, which makes sweeping impact. And then something people don't talk about a lot is combining policy change with innovation. I'll tell you about that. So right now we have some of our programs include reducing waste in Durham schools, where we switch schools and school districts off of styrofoam lunch trays and plastic forks to reusable. We create plastic waste prevention policy. We have a program called Bull City Boomerang Bag. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And the recirculation project, which really is relevant to the recycling industry. But first off, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this concept of circular economy, but I love to use this graphic, which shows, like Macy was talking about, how we're for the most part in a linear economy. Things are extracted from the earth, manufactured, sold, used by consumers, and much of that eventually ends up in a landfill. And the recycling economy is very important, but of course it's not the whole solution. Because the circular economy is not a novel concept, but it's something that really deserves attention, and we have shown that the infrastructure for this can be built and that this can be a reality. And the circular economy's definition is really very simple: designing a product from the beginning for maximum quality material health, and then getting that product into a system where it can be used over and over again, and this is important, in the form in which it was originally intended. So we started with this idea I had way back in 2010 and made a reality in 2017. We were the very first of its kind and the very first to use technology like a library card to assign accountability, to assign a checkout of a container. We want to, obviously, if you are trying to work in a circular economy situation, if you do not get recovery of materials, there is absolutely no reason to start a reuse system. So that was very important to us. We launched it in 2017 with partner locations. We have a giant number of paid subscribers, and we do trash-free takeout, school meals, catering, grocery store food. And how it works is, if you look at the top left where there's a hand holding a phone, we have a very simple app, and it simply works like a library card. If you're a Green to Go member, you go into your favorite Green to Go restaurant, tell them you're Green to Go, and you will receive your takeout food in a container that is made of number 5 polypropylene. It can last 1,000 washes or more. Since the last 6 years, we still have all of our original containers still in circulation. You check that container out, or containers, take it home, enjoy it, and when you're ready, you return it to any return station in town, and we pick them up. We have 3 routes around our city where we pick up all of the dirty containers, and we transport them to our central wash facility. We are permitted and inspected by the county health department, and then we redistribute those back to the restaurants. So very simple, and it's a circle. And like I said, what it needs, if we are to move to something that's other than trash and recycling, we need infrastructure. And that includes the transport, the routes, the staff, the wash facility, and the means to recover the materials. So it's received a lot of attention over the last 6 years. We're very proud of it. And what we found was that, now this is probably an outdated slide, Macy can attest to that, reuse systems are really growing across the US and the world. And we are one of the only nonprofits in this space that operates a company like this. We are very committed to proliferating reuse systems everywhere. So we have helped many of these cities start their own reuse systems with all of the research and best practices and lessons learned that we've collected. What we realized when we built this infrastructure was that, gosh, a takeout container system for restaurants is great. But with this infrastructure, we can really wash any kind of packaging. We can make reuse possible in more sectors. If you look into circular economy a little more deeply, you will come across the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is sort of a global think tank around the circular economy, and that converting plastic packaging to reuse is a huge business opportunity. So we're talking about not just restaurant takeout here. Switching gears for a little bit, I want to talk to you about how policy and innovation go together. So we're very lucky that the 10-cent bag fee on single-use bags is expected to pass this summer. Now, since 2020, we have operated a program called Bowl City Boomerang Bags, where we create thousands and thousands of durable retail bags from reuse materials that are available free at checkout in grocery stores across the city. They circulate around the city. We pick them up and restock the grocery stores. You never have to bring your own. And this is a way to pair policy and innovation. And our wash infrastructure allows us to support this as well. So this is what I really want to talk to you about, is the recirculation project. When we scale reuse across the city, let's say we expand it to more than just takeout restaurants and grocery store bags, but we aim to make Durham entirely reusable. Now, that's in the future, but what will that future need to look like? We have a hypothesis that the existing recycling industry, with its infrastructure, recycling already really does well, collection, sorting, squishing up materials and selling them to foreign buyers. What if the existing recycling industry could be modified to also facilitate a societal shift to reusables? So we had this hypothesis and we wanted to test it. What if recovery and redistribution of reusable packaging could be a municipal utility? So what we did was, we tagged with RFID a lot of types of reusable packaging. And this was in 2019. We began testing this proof of concept that we wanted to find out and test our hypothesis. Could this even remotely be possible? So we RFID tagged a bunch of reusables, and we got the permission from the City of Durham Solid Waste and Sunoco Corporation, which is our large MRF in the area in our region, to commingle these inside the blue bins on one route of a recycling pickup. And we followed their journey by drone all the way to the MRF, where of course they're dumped on the floor, scooped up with a front loader and put into the hopper to go through the gauntlet of torture through the recycling machinery and human sorters. And when these reusable containers and other packaging came up the conveyor belt, we mounted this RFID scanner. You can see is the white item. It would alert the first human sorters that a reusable was coming down the line, and they would simply grab it and put it in a bin beside them. So this was the very first proof of concept that sorting of reusables in with the recyclables is possible. So obviously, I know what you're thinking as people in the recycling industry. Well, this is a concept that is fraught with problems. Obviously, we don't want to put reusables through the gauntlet of torture. We don't want to dump them on the floor. So what would that need to look like? Luckily, there are some opportunities here. The Sunoco Corporation and the City of Durham Solid Waste Management were very excited with these results because it turns out they weren't just bureaucrats, but closet innovators. They were able to see the possibility, and we began to create a list of what design modifications would be needed, either to attempt to retrofit existing MRFs or design the MRFs of the future to also include collection, processing, and redistribution of reusables. So the next question that everyone always has is this sustainable? Is this even remotely financially feasible? So phase 2 we completed in 2020 with a waste economist and a group from Duke University to do a full value chain analysis for recovery of durable materials and redistribution. So we looked at everyone from Amazon shipping boxes all the way to small local reuse programs. And the concept was, if Amazon was to invest in reusable shipping boxes, and these could be reused X number of times, would they pay a MRF like Sunoco to ship those back to them? And is the amount that they would pay enough for Sunoco to want to do it? And the answer was yes. Sunoco is desperately seeking out additional earned revenue streams. This would represent that for them. And the caveat is that it must have volume. Obviously, we don't want to ship two boxes back to Amazon. We want to ship 500,000 at a time. So phase 3, which we completed last summer, was to prove the volume. So we actually simulated being a hauler and a MRF. We conducted citywide residential pickup of reusable packaging, and we located end markets for those items and calculated the financial feasibility at volume for reusable packaging. Its pickup, its wash sanitization, and its redistribution. So what did it involve? Partnerships with local businesses that wanted their packaging back, residents putting their glass jars and bottles on their porch we sorting, washing, sanitizing, and getting those back to the businesses, and any unusable glass went directly to SMI. So I'd like to tell you now why reuse is the future, and from all of our experience, we can tell you that it's what the world needs. So reuse is an economic movement. It grows wealth in the community. It builds community resilience. It eliminates our dependence on the global supply chain because it circulates resources locally or hyper-locally. Reuse systems mean human and ecosystem survival. Reuse systems are regenerative, and by our experience, compared to disposable, they reduce carbon emissions by 98%, and they significantly conserve fossil fuels, water, and electricity. Reuse is also a social justice movement. As Macy pointed out, disposable systems exploit and pollute, and reuse systems reduce negative health outcomes because they do not contain the toxins that enter landfill streets, waterways, oceans, etc. And reuse systems add more love to the community. I think one thing that we really need to do is expand our minds. We need to be thinking about reuse systems as a means to expand workforce development. Reuse requires labor, and that means jobs. And that's living wage jobs for underemployed populations. We currently have the only certified neuro-inclusive workplace, so we employ the intellectually and developmentally disabled and autistic people. We employ formerly incarcerated people, military veterans, and the vision impaired. So, what's needed at the city level? We need infrastructure. Help reuse systems to help us all. So I want to challenge local governments and state governments and federal governments. If you have sustainability goals, reuse can help you meet them and get you measurable impact. So local governments in our city can support reuse infrastructure financially. On its way to evolving departments to making reuse a municipal utility, adopt reuse yourselves, put reuse in your budgets and programming. As an example of the supportive policy, we've created with the Durham County Health Department together co-branded official guidance for reuse. We've even helped our state of North Carolina change its food code to allow for reusables. And we want to point out that reuse systems at a city level need at least one large anchor client. So a baseball stadium, a school district. That's what allows for reuse to be possible at all the other sectors in a community. So some of my visioning is for fleets of beautiful vehicles, large-scale wash and sorting facilities. We are opening our fourth wash facility. We're in our third one, and we have already reached maximum capacity. So we're looking at a 15 to 20,000 square foot recirculation hub. And this is a little mock-up I did personally on my vision for the future, where we have electric vehicles circulating around the city, providing green jobs and showing community resilience and regeneration of our resources. So I want to point out that as far as recycling industry opportunities, there's a huge opportunity here, $218 billion projected in the packaging industry. There's huge opportunities in all sectors. And I think just to conclude, all of the standalone reuse systems that we're looking at that Macy mentioned, these are great. These are, collecting, these reuse systems are collecting and washing themselves. But I really see a big cross-industry, ubiquitous, all-encompassing infrastructure that makes supply chain and wash facilities available so that we can make reuse the norm. And we're proving that in our city of Durham, and I hope that you'll let me know how I can help. Everybody still there?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Wow, that was phenomenal. So I want to start a movement now called Clone Crystal Dreisbach, because we need to have a crystal in every city and every state to take this concept and really make it so. And I know, Crystal, you're probably stretched kind of thin right now. And everybody else who wants to raise your hand to make it so, post something on the in the chat or elsewhere. I'm really excited about this, and we had a webinar last month we had 6 different reuse organizations in Maryland participating. And the wonderful opportunity for the recycling community is that this intercepts so much material before it gets to recycling. It actually lowers the load that we're trying to carry with our recycling and solid waste management systems. Crystal.
I also want to point out something I didn't mention, but this is very relevant to the people in this group, that our next hypothesis is that reuse can lower contamination rates of recycling. And we are in our research right now proving that. And I think the results will be very exciting because we're already seeing that. Some of the closed loop systems that we provide washing service for, we do waste audits before and after baseline and post intervention, and it's showing that we are actually reducing the contamination rates of the recycling stream. So that can be something also really beneficial to look at. I know that's one of the main pain points in the recycling industry.
Yeah, wonderful. And we're also want to encourage all the closet innovators out there who are hiding from the spotlight to step up and let's make some changes here in Maryland. So any questions from the audience? I know we've got a lot of you folks here. You can post them in chat, or if you want to open your microphone, we'd be more than happy to have you participate in the conversation in whatever way you can. So Crystal Michelle is asking, has there been a sort characterization audit done in the city of Durham since you started the boomerang bag program?
Yes, we are. I just realized I need to plug in. I hope I don't zap out from having no electricity to the laptop. I'll do that in a moment. But, you know, I think that based on the very high numbers of a city like ours, we have 285,000 residents. And I think there's some pretty good statistics out there available on how many single-use bags the average citizen uses. And it is a massive amount on an annual basis. So even though we crank out with volunteers and reuse materials in our assembly lines, thousands of bags, it is not but a drop in the bucket. And so what we are, ooh, you're gonna love this. Okay, see, this is a real policy and innovation solution. The revenue generated from a 10-cent bag fee, what our policy recommendation is that it goes to a line item in the City of Durham Solid Waste Management Department. Imagine this. It is not only practical, but it's also highly profound and symbolic. For the first time ever, this city department will have a reuse line item in their budget. And the over $1 million that it is projected to create from the single-use bag fee, that is what we are recommending that goes to a program like Bull City Boomerang Bag. Obviously, we're biased. Hopefully, they give it to Bull City Boomerang Bag, but we can then expand to every grocery store in the city so that, yes, there are fees on single-use bags, but you have options. Now you can pay 10 cents if you really want one. You can go without a bag, you can bring your own, or you can take a Bull City Boomerang Bag, which is available right there at checkout. We created our own little turnstile dispenser for checkout. And it just really makes sense. So I think, well, right now we have various NGOs across the city who regularly do, what are those called? Litter surveys. They clean streams, they clean streets, and we're harmonizing their data collection tools so we can see the changes. So baseline heavily polluted waterways and streets. After boomerang bag goes spread after the 10-cent fee is passed, post-intervention, many cities across the US have done this, but they've seen a 50 to 90% decrease in the plastic film in the environment after policy like this is made.
That's phenomenal. And before your battery dies, Tom Brewer wanted to know, do you have a ballpark initial and some sense of the maintenance costs for the cleaning facility, for your recirculation facility?
Yes, so we do. In fact, we just did some amazing calculations last week. We're working with the Durham Public School System, which is about 33,000 students in 56 schools. And we helped them calculate if they were to add dishwashing machines to their kitchens and wash these in-house, it would be approximately $2.1 million of startup cost and $1.2 million annual operating for those 56 schools to have 56 dishwashing machines going, versus 100,000 startup if Don't Waste Durham were to take that on, and 775,000 in operating expense. So it's a vastly lower startup and 40% cost savings for Durham Public Schools. So we're looking really heavily into the numbers. We know how to design third-party wash systems. Obviously, if you're operating 56 dishwashers at the same time versus 1 or 2 large conveyor style dishwashers that can process 200 racks an hour each, you're going to see a lot of logistical efficiencies, standardization of sanitation practices, job creation. So the cost of operation is looking very good. We have those numbers. And of course, the other benefits mean that there's really no reason why we should not be doing this.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. Any other questions for Crystal or Macy? And I know you can go to the Don't Waste Durham website or the Upstream website. They have tons of resources there. You can read a lot about their programs. And I also know that if you send them questions, they will answer you in pretty short order. They're both very committed to helping move this conversation forward. And I think we have a great opportunity here in Maryland to chase that down. I just want to remind you that the conference is coming up on Monday, June 12th at the Turf Valley Conference Center. If you're not a member, please join. Before we go, how about a big round of applause for Crystal and Macy? Thumbs up, whatever noise you want to make. This has been a great presentation. I'm really excited about it. And we will have a reuse session at the conference itself. We have some folks from DC has a Fix-It program. They'll be presenting that. And so there's some other opportunities that are really beginning to float up in a variety of areas that we had not seen before. So hope you all can join us there. And we look forward to seeing you on Monday, June 12th. And Crystal and Macy, once again, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.